I've lived on the outskirts of Spokane for over 2 decades now, in a modest 2-bedroom house nestled at the edge of a tree line that stretches into miles of forest. It's quiet, peaceful, or at least it used to be. I've always felt safe here. Maybe because after losing my husband, safety became something I clung to like a lifeline. Or maybe because I've got Max. Max is a 6-year-old German Shepherd, the kind of dog you trust with your life. He's gentle with my grandkids, doesn't bark at squirrels or passing cars, and ignores thunder like it's background noise. He minds his own business, always has. That's why the night he started growling at the back door, my blood ran cold before I even got off the couch. It was just past 10:30 p.m., and I was wrapped up in a blanket watching an old Hitchcock film on TCM. The fire was dying down and the room was dim except for the flickering screen and the warm glow of a table lamp. Max had been curled up in his usual spot by the fireplace. I didn't even hear him get up. I just noticed the growl. It started low, so quiet I thought it might have been the movie. But then it deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. I looked up and there he was, standing rigid, ears pinned back, tail down, eyes fixed on the back door like something was waiting on the other side. I muted the TV. "Max," I said softly. He didn't look at me. Didn't move. Just growled. I turned to look at the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. It was dark outside, the porch light was off, and the forest behind the fence was nothing but a silhouette against the moonlit sky. The snow had started earlier that day, just a light dusting, but enough to coat the ground in white. There weren't any prints, not that I could see. Still, Max was tense as a bowstring. I got up and grabbed the flashlight from the shelf by the fireplace, flicking it on and moving toward the door. As soon as I took a step, Max's growl escalated. I stopped, heart pounding. "Okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. I turned on the porch light. That dull amber flood bath bathed the backyard in a hazy glow. The patio furniture was covered in snow. The bird feeder swayed gently, and the trees stood still like they were holding their breath. Nothing moved. No raccoons, no deer. No reason for Max to be reacting this way. I slid the door open just a crack and leaned forward. The air bit my face like it had teeth. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone out there?" Silence. Just wind. I closed the door and locked it tight, still watching the backyard. "There's nothing, Max," I muttered. "Probably a raccoon." But Max didn't budge. He stood there another 20 minutes, staring, tail still, growling under his breath. By morning, it was like nothing had happened. He ate his breakfast and wagged his tail when I grabbed the leash. I led him out back to do his business and stepped onto the porch in my slippers, sipping hot coffee. The air smelled like snow and pine. That's when I saw them. Footprints. In the snow. They weren't mine. They weren't Max's. They started at the tree line just beyond the fence and led in a straight, deliberate line to the side of the house. I followed them with my eyes, my stomach sinking as I realized exactly where they ended, right under my bedroom window. They didn't go to the porch, didn't wander off like someone was just passing through. They walked straight to the window and stopped. I set my coffee down slowly, breath fogging up in the cold. The prints were deep, heavy. Whoever made them had stood there a while, watching. I didn't say anything out loud. Max stood beside me, ears flat, his gaze tracking the same line of prints. A growl rumbled low in his throat. That's when I knew. This wasn't a kid. This wasn't a prank. Someone had been watching me sleep. I grabbed the snow shovel from the side of the house and started smashing the prints. I didn't want to see them. Didn't want to imagine it. I didn't sleep much that night. I left the lights on in every room and kept Max beside me, a baseball bat across my lap. I watched the back door until my eyes burned. Around 2 a.m., Max lifted his head. No growl, no bark. A whine. That sound cut deeper than any growl ever could. A whimper of fear, not aggression. Then I heard it. A tap, soft, deliberate, on the glass. I froze. My bedroom was pitch black, but I knew exactly where the sound came from. The window. Another tap. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. Max whimpered from the hallway, scratching at the closed bedroom door. I was alone in the room. The air felt wrong, like I was underwater. I lay there for what felt like an eternity. No more taps, no footsteps, just silence. When the sun finally rose, I opened the bedroom door and Max barreled in like he'd been waiting all night. He ran straight to the window, nose pressed against the frame, sniffing wildly. I pulled back the curtain. More prints, only this time, they didn't end at the window. They led back into the woods. Deep, deliberate tracks. Someone had stood there again. For how long, I don't know. But they hadn't tried to get in, hadn't jiggled the lock, hadn't broken the glass. They had just watched. I filed a report with the sheriff. He came out, walked the yard, nodded a lot. Probably just a drifter, he said. They cut through here sometimes. I nodded too, but I didn't believe it, not really. That night I sat in the dark. Max lay at my feet. The bat rested on my knees. No TV, no phone, just waiting. At 2:37 a.m., Max stood up. His growl returned, but lower this time. More primal, like he was holding something back. I gripped the bat, hand tight around the handle. I stared at the window. I saw it again. Not the figure, not the face, but the movement, just under the frame. A thin piece of metal, sliding in through the gap. A hook, trying to find the latch. My breath hitched. I didn't move. Neither did Max. We just watched. Whoever was out there, they knew how to do this. The movement was slow, practiced, like they wanted to see if I'd react. Then Max lost it. He lunged, snarling, crashing into the wall beneath the window so hard the blind shook. The hook vanished. I ran to the back door and threw it open. Max pushed past me, growling, his body low to the ground. The yard was empty. Almost. Near the trees, just past the fence line, something moved. A shadow, tall, still, watching. Then it turned and vanished into the woods. I didn't chase it. Max stopped at the edge of the snow, barking into the trees like he could still see it. And maybe he could. I haven't seen the figure again. The police couldn't find any signs of forced entry, said it might have been a trespasser, maybe someone passing through, but I know better. I've lived alone for years, and I've never felt alone until now. I don't sleep near the window anymore. I don't let Max out by himself after dark, and I never, ever leave that back door unlocked. Because Max wasn't just scared, he knew something was out there, and it was waiting. Some people would have packed up and left after what happened to me and Max. I thought about it. Spent a week sleeping with the bat still across my lap and the windows double locked. But this house, it's mine. I built a life here, so I stayed, and maybe that was the mistake. Maybe some part of me believed what the deputy said about it being a drifter or a one-time prowler. But deep down, I knew something worse. That thing out in the woods, whatever it was, it hadn't finished. I started checking in with my neighbors more often after that. We're not exactly a tight-knit community out here, but you wave when you pass each other on the road. You nod if someone's mowing their lawn. I mentioned the footprints to old Jim 2 lots down. He hadn't seen anything. Said his motion light flickered once around 2 a.m., but nothing showed. Most people just told me to buy a better camera system. That was the funny part. I had a friend who did just that, upgraded his setup, got himself some real peace of mind. His name was Derek Hale. 41, built like a truck, arms like steel cables, and a mustache that probably hadn't changed since high school. Derek was a mechanic, lived alone on a 3-acre property about 40 minutes south of me, near a stretch of state forest. We'd crossed paths at the feed store a few years back, talked tools, trucks, and everything in between. When I told him about the man outside my window, he didn't laugh. He just got quiet. That was Derek's way. He kept things to himself until he didn't, and when he did, what he told me made my story feel like a warm-up act. Derek said the first time he noticed anything off, it was small. A couple beers missing from the second fridge in his garage, a sandwich gone, a pack of jerky that he could have sworn was still sealed the day before. Nothing huge, just little things. Things you could blame on forgetfulness, or a raccoon. Except Derek didn't keep junk food outside. And his garage door had a habit of locking itself shut when it closed. He didn't think much of it at first, but the second week, he found the fridge door cracked open and a footprint in the dust by the back wall. Human. barefoot. He bought a trail cam the next day and set it up facing the garage, just in case. The footage he got shook him bad. I saw the clip myself. He showed me on his phone, in the back of the hardware store like it was contraband. It was grainy, black and white, time-stamped at 2:08 a.m. The man crawled out from behind the shed on all fours, slow and careful, like an animal. He was tall, slender, hair in clumps, clothes layered like a scarecrow. He didn't go into the garage, not that night, just stood near it, turning his head slowly toward Derek's kitchen window, and then stood still for 10 minutes, not moving, not blinking, watching. Derek said it felt like the guy could see through the glass, like he knew where the camera was. He handed me the phone, and I could barely hold it. That stare burned through the screen. I asked Derek what he did after that. He said he called the sheriff, same as I had. They came out, did a sweep, checked the shed. That's when they found it. A rolled-up sleeping bag tucked behind a stack of old tires, empty food wrappers, an old army stipple canteen, and something worse, a notebook. It was jammed between two boards, wrapped in a garbage bag like the writer didn't want it getting wet, pages and pages filled with Derek's name, over and over. Derek Hale, Derek H., Derek eats dinner at 7:30, Derek watches the news in his chair, Derek doesn't lock the kitchen window. I remember Derek's hands when he told me this. They were shaking, big strong hands, the kind that pulled engines out of trucks, and they trembled like leaves in the wind. He didn't sleep that night, sat on the couch with a shotgun and the lights off. He thought it was over when the cops took the notebook and tore down the makeshift camp. But 5 nights later, Derek woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. He grabbed the shotgun, checked every window, every lock. Everything was shut, nothing broken. But the next morning, he checked his trail cam again. There he was. Same man, same rags, this time standing directly in front of the camera, staring into the lens and smiling. That was the last straw. Derek moved out a week later, sold the place cheap and never looked back. Said no house was worth trying to sleep knowing someone had memorized the way your bedroom light hits the curtains. I think about Derek a lot now, about how that thing came back. Not to steal, not to break in, but just to be seen. To remind you that you're never as alone as you think. Maybe Derek's story ended differently than mine, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever visited me and Max that night, it's the same kind of evil. Quiet, patient, and hungry for the kind of fear that doesn't come from being attacked. It comes from being watched, from realizing you're the show, and someone out there doesn't want to change the channel, they just want to keep watching until you break. Some stories stick with you long after they're told. After Derek moved out, I couldn't shake the image of that man staring into the trail cam, smiling like he'd just won something. That smile haunted me, more than the footprints outside my own bedroom window. Something about it. It wasn't desperate. It was patient, confident, like he knew exactly how much fear he'd planted and exactly when it would bloom. I kept thinking, what if he hadn't left? What if he just found someone new, a quieter house, a softer target? That's when I remembered Maya Torres. She's the daughter of an old friend, lived about 2,000 miles east of me, over in Salem, Massachusetts. 30-something, quiet type, works from home designing websites and running tech support gigs online, lived alone in a small historic house tucked between two bigger ones, the kind with creaky floors and drafty windows and a front porch made for late summer rocking chairs. We hadn't talked in years, not since her mom passed, but a few months back she sent me a message. Just a simple, "Hey, how've you been?" At the time, I figured she was just being kind. After hearing Derek's story and seeing what that man had done, I dug through my messages and read hers again. I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The timestamp, 3:41 a.m. So I reached out, and after a few hesitant exchanges she opened up. She told me everything. It started on a Thursday night, just after midnight. Maya had just wrapped up work in her home office upstairs, back aching, eyes dry from the screen. She had her usual routine, shut the laptop, check the doors, turn off the porch light, and crash. Only this time, when she stepped outside to make sure everything was locked up, she noticed something missing. The spare key she always kept under the welcome mat. It was gone. She told herself maybe she'd moved it. Maybe she'd forgotten she brought it inside. It happens, right? But deep down, she knew she hadn't touched it. Still, she locked up, shook off the unease, and went to bed. That was her first mistake, ignoring the knot in her gut. The next day, she texted her best friend Laura, asking if she'd taken the key. "Nope," came the reply. "Should I have?" That left only one option. Someone else had taken it. That night, Maya did what most people would. She convinced herself it didn't matter. She turned on a movie, curled up with a glass of wine, and tried to push the thought away. It worked. Until the movie ended and she turned off the TV. That's when it hit her. That feeling, the one that crawls across your skin when someone is standing behind you. She looked toward her bedroom door. It was open. She always closed it before bed. She was sure of it. Her heart started racing. She got up, walked to the door, and locked it. That small act felt like slamming a bolt across her entire world. Sometime around 3 a.m., she woke up in pitch-black silence. Her breath felt heavy. The air in the room had changed, thicker, colder. Then she heard it, a soft click, not from inside, from the hall, the unmistakable sound of a key turning in a lock. She froze. Every nerve screamed to move, to run, to do anything, but she just lay there, muscles locked, eyes wide open. Then came the next sound, a quiet shuffle, weight pressing down on the floorboards. Outside her room, she turned her head toward the door, heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. Still locked. Then, under the thin gap at the bottom of the door, a shadow moved, slowly, deliberately. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She got up, as quietly as she could, and slipped into her closet. It was the only place she could go. She eased the door shut behind her and crouched down, phone clutched in her hand, too terrified to even turn on the screen. She could hear the floorboards groan again. Then, fingers, light taps on the wood of her door, like someone dragging nails along it. Then, nothing. Minutes passed. Then hours. Time stopped existing. She stayed in the closet until dawn bled through the edges of the blinds. When she finally opened the door, the house was silent. The front door was locked. The windows were locked. Nothing broken, nothing stolen. But when she stepped outside, she felt that crawling sensation again. She lifted the doormat, more out of instinct than curiosity, and there it was. The key, right back where it had been, clean, placed perfectly. She told me she stared at it for almost a full minute, not breathing. That's when it hit her. It wasn't about stealing anything. Whoever had come into her house hadn't taken a thing. They had returned the key. Like a message. She changed every lock that afternoon, had a locksmith out within hours, but she never called the police. What would she say? Someone came into my house, didn't steal anything, and put the key back where they found it. There were no signs of entry, no footage. She had a camera at the front porch, but the memory card was full. She'd never thought to replace it. For weeks after, she slept with the lights on, moved a dresser in front of her bedroom door, installed a chain lock, a motion light, and a new alarm system, but none of it erased the feeling that she had been watched, that someone had stood there in the dark, just feet away, listening to her breathe. The worst part, she told me, wasn't the key. It was the question she couldn't stop asking herself every night before bed. If he got in once, what's stopping him from coming back? I didn't have an answer for her, because I'd asked myself the same thing. And when I think about Derek and his trail cam, or Max growling at the dark, or Maya staring at the underside of her bedroom door from inside a closet, it all starts to blur together. Different places, different people, same eyes in the dark. There's something terrifying about the quiet kind of evil, the kind that doesn't break windows or kick down doors. It doesn't wear a mask or carry a weapon. It just watches. It waits. That's what Maya learned. That's what I learned. And I wish I could say the stories ended there, with a moved house, a changed lock, a dog's growl in the night. But they didn't, because just a few weeks later I heard from Tommy Garner. Tommy and I go way back. served together on a volunteer fire crew in our 20s, before life scattered us like leaves across different states. We kept in touch, off and on. Facebook, the occasional phone call, that sort of thing. Tommy lived in Idaho now, semi-retired. Spent most of his time working remote IT gigs, fixing people's networks and cussing at Comcast. He lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Twin Falls, the kind of place with trimmed hedges and old American flags hanging from mailboxes. Middle of the week, 3 in the afternoon, and his phone buzzed. Someone was knocking at the door. He figured it was a delivery, or maybe the mailman needing a signature. But when he looked through the peephole, he saw a man in a navy blue jumpsuit standing on the porch. The guy looked clean-cut, mid-40s, no beard, hair short and neat. He was holding a clipboard and wore a polite, too-wide smile. Tommy cracked the door just a few inches, chain still on. "Can I help you?" The man said he was with the gas company. Something about a reported leak in the area. Said they needed to do a quick inspection of the line inside his house. Tommy didn't buy it for a second. There'd been no notice, no email, no letter. He'd been home all day, and there hadn't been a single utility truck on the street. "You got a badge?" Tommy asked. The man hesitated, just for a beat. Then he gestured down the road. "It's in my truck. I can go grab it if you need." Tommy leaned to look. No truck. The road was empty. "No thanks," he said, and started to close the door. But the man didn't move, didn't push. He just stood there, smiling, like he wasn't surprised to be denied, like he was waiting for something else. But eventually he turned and walked away. Not down the street, not toward the road. He circled around the side of the house. Tommy locked the door. Deadbolt, chain, latch, every lock he had. Then he went window to window, following the man's path. But when he got to the kitchen window and looked out, the yard was empty. That night, Tommy didn't sleep. He just paced, kept all the lights on. He had 1 indoor camera in the living room and 2 outside. But no memory cards. Live view only. He hadn't gotten around to installing them. That detail would haunt him later. At 2:47 a.m., he woke up. He didn't know why at first. Just a tightness in his chest, the feeling like something was off kilter. Then he heard it. A soft creak. Not from outside, from the yard. He grabbed the flashlight off his nightstand and crept toward the back door, careful not to step too hard on the wood floor. When he flicked on the light and looked outside, his heart dropped. The gate was wide open. He always locked that gate. And there, in the snow-dusted gravel, were fresh footprints. Leading up to the side of the house, straight to the basement door. The door was locked. Nothing was broken, but someone had been there. Standing, waiting. He didn't open it. Didn't even breathe. Just backed away and locked the deadbolt again, knife in hand, staring at the grainy live feed on his phone screen until the sun came up. The next morning, Tommy went next door. His neighbor, Mrs. Landry, had lived on that block for 30 years. The type who always noticed everything, whether she meant to or not. He asked her if she'd seen a utility worker the day before. Her face went pale. "I saw him, but he wasn't with the gas company." Tommy's stomach sank. She said he'd knocked on 3 houses before his. One of the women let him in. She seemed fine afterward, but Mrs. Landry noticed the locks on her doors had been changed the next morning. Tommy called the gas company that afternoon. They confirmed it. They hadn't sent anyone to the neighborhood, so he filed a report with the police. They took some notes, promised to patrol the area, but they didn't sound hopeful. "Probably just a scammer," one of them said, "looking to lift a few wallets, maybe some electronics." But Tommy wasn't so sure, because the man never tried to sell anything, never even insisted on getting inside. He just smiled and waited. That smile, Tommy said, was the same kind Maya had described, that polite, patient grin that didn't need to hide anything because it already knew too much. Tommy changed all his locks the next day, got a full security system installed, memory cards in every camera, extra bolts, motion sensors, floodlights. For a while things were quiet, until 2 weeks later he woke up around 3 a.m. again. No noise, no nightmare. Just that feeling, that invisible weight pressing down on the air in the room. He got out of bed, turned on the security app and flipped through the camera feeds. Front yard, backyard, living room. Then he stopped. The front door. It was open, just a crack, but wide enough to see the darkness outside, wide enough for someone to have been there. He froze. He knew he had locked it, checked it twice before bed. He hadn't heard the deadbolt click or the knob turn, no chime from the alarm. But now, it was open, and when he rewound the footage, his stomach twisted. There was nothing, because the camera had frozen for exactly 1 minute before the door opened. 1 minute of black screen. No glitch before or after, just that exact window. He sat on the couch with a bat across his lap and waited until morning. Nothing was taken, nothing moved, no footprints, no handprints, just the open door. The police didn't offer much help. The footage was inconclusive. No forced entry, no crime. But Tommy knew better. So did I. Because this wasn't a break-in. This wasn't someone trying to steal something. This was someone making sure you knew they were inside, they could come back, and they weren't done watching. If there's one thing these stories have taught me, whether it's Eleanor's dog growling at something only he could sense, Derek's camera capturing a stranger crawling from the shadows, or Maya waking up to find her key mysteriously returned, it's this: evil doesn't always kick down your door. Sometimes it waits, it watches, it learns you, and the scariest part? It doesn't want your TV or your wallet. It wants your fear. We often think of safety as something we can buy, locks, alarms, cameras, and yes, those things matter, but the truth is, awareness is your first defense. That strange feeling you get in your gut, that flicker of discomfort that makes you check the window twice, or question why the key isn't where you left it, trust it, because the moment you start dismissing those instincts is the moment you become a target. If you live alone, make it a habit to update your locks regularly. Don't leave spare keys outside, not under mats, not in planters, not above door frames. These are the first places they look. Install cameras with memory storage, and always back up your footage. If someone knocks and you weren't expecting them, don't open the door. Ask for ID, check for company vehicles, and if something feels even slightly off, don't second guess yourself. Talk to your neighbors. Share stories like these, not to scare, but to prepare. Because for every person who thinks it could never happen here, there's someone else who thought the same, until it did. I don't share these stories to keep you up at night, though I know they probably will. I share them because sometimes real horror doesn't wear a mask or come out of a book. It stands in the dark, just past the edge of your vision, and waits for you to forget it was ever there. To everyone who's listened to this far, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting Enigma of the Unknown. This channel exists because of people like you who believe in facing the darkness, not ignoring it. If these stories made you think twice about leaving a window unlocked or checking your porch light before bed, then maybe they've done what they're supposed to. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and remember, if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Be safe, be aware, and never, ever ignore the silence until the next nightmare.